"We shall accept battle if everybody wants it," said General Kutuzov. "But believe me, my dear boy, there is nothing stronger than those two, patience and time. They will do it all." But the advisors don't see it that way. That's the trouble. So what's one to do, he asked, and his eyes shone with a deep, shrewd look. "I will tell you what to do and what I do. When in doubt, my dear fellow, do nothing." That was from War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Welcome to Hot Takes on the Classics, a gossipy gallop through the best books ever written. My name is Emily Maeda, and I am joined by Tim McIntosh. You have joined us during our season on war, and today we get to speak about a real short book named War and Peace. And Tim, I know that this is one of your favorite books.
It is so much my favorite that it will affect my hot take at the end of this episode, Emily. That's how strongly I feel about it.
Okay. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
So War and Peace is famously long, right?
Famously.
It's kind of a joke how long it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those books that you're like, maybe this would be better served as a doorstop, to keep the kitchen door open or something like that. But I am going to begin making my case now to our listeners that this book is absolutely worth your time, and it is worth the, pardon the pun, heavy lift of reading all 1,000 plus pages. And I even have for you a reading program to read the book in 1 year. That's how dedicated I am to this book. So let me try, Emily, to capture the plot of the book.
Well, good luck. That will be great.
Right.
I'll be
Good
looking
luck.
forward to how you do that. Go ahead. Let's hear it.
Every time I tried to write a one-sentence synopsis of the book, it ended up sounding like a Hallmark movie instead of Leo Tolstoy's epic War and Peace. So actually, you know what, Clark, our producer, if you don't mind, would you drop in some nice violin music while I read my kind of false start summaries of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace? Here we go. War and Peace follows the lives of 3 Russian families as they navigate love, loss, ambition, and heartbreak. I got 2 more. Hold on. You haven't get started yet.
I hope I can make it through this. The treacle. The treacle is too much.
War and Peace tells the story of youth, love, and heartbreak against the backdrop of the Napoleonic invasion of Russia. Okay, one more. We got to do one more Hallmark send-up. Here it is. War and Peace is a vibrant novel of conflict, romance, class climbing, and the meaninglessness of war.
Hey, were you trying to make these bad, or were you?
Yeah.
Were you okay. Because those are really bad.
I know they're really bad, but I think part of the reason that I kind of stumbled into sounding Hallmarky is that this book is not just a story of the Napoleonic invasion of Russia. Of course, it's that. But it really is an epic in the kind of classical tradition. It is about all of life. It is about all of life. The Iliad, the first epic that we discussed on this podcast, is about all of life. It's not just about war. And the Aeneid, everything, every aspect of human relations is discussed in the Aeneid. Dante's Divine Comedy. They're not just long books, but their scope is magnificently wide. And Tolstoy's War and Peace might have the widest scope of all.
Can I ask you a question about that, though?
Yeah.
Making a claim, is it, so you're using epic in sort of the way moderns use epic, which means epic, like huge.
Awesome. It's so big.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. But does it really deserve that? Because do we have an epic hero? Are you going to make a case that we have an epic hero?
I think we do have an epic hero, but he's not along the warrior class of Iliad or the Odyssey. He's just the opposite.
He doesn't work as the epic hero. It is vast in scale. Vast in scale.
Vast in scale. But I would make a case, and this is a conversation that might just be too in the weeds, that Tolstoy is actually in the Homeric tradition.
Wow. Okay, we might have to argue about that.
Take,
but keep going. Keep going. We might have to. That's really interesting. I'll be interesting to hear how you develop.
Think of War and Peace this way, Emily. Imagine like the last big conflict that we had in the United States. Maybe like the Gulf War. No. Stay with me here. Stay with me. Think about like turning on CNN because we know that there's this big conflict that's happening out there and it's just kind of ongoing. And so you've got CNN on in the background and they're doing reports from the front and about munitions and about the soldiers' morale. Like this is always going on in the background of your living room. But in the foreground of your living room where you actually live, that's where life is actually happening. And then you stop, and you gather as a family and you say, something big is happening in the war right now. Let's all pay attention. That's how War and Peace functions. It begins from the very first moment of the very first page as a discussion over what is it going to happen when Napoleon comes into Russia. But sometimes Napoleon drops to the background.
Yes.
Sometimes he comes to the foreground. And so what we get in between are all
the living
sorts
of life.
The living of life.
Yeah.
And there is nobody better at creating scenes, vibrant, like thrilling, moving scenes from everyday life than Leo Tolstoy. So it's the marriage between Andrei and his wife is deeply under strain. Oh, Napoleon is crossing the Alps in the background. Pierre, our semi-epic hero, is considering becoming a Freemason. Oh, Napoleon is about to attack Moscow.
Yeah.
Natasha and her father, Count Rostov, are attending a fox hunt. They're participating in a fox hunt. Napoleon just attacked Smolensk. That's how the book functions. It functions that way.
I think it's hard for us as Americans to really get that because we've never been invaded. That's what I was going to say. So the call to the Gulf War, it's a good call because, or you see scenes in Europe during World War II and life goes on, and that's part of what Tolstoy is showing. It's hard for us to even imagine it because we, to put ourselves in that place because we've never ever experienced anybody. I mean, I guess maybe our best, and maybe that's why we get a lot of novels from that period in the U.S. Probably the Civil War is the closest, wouldn't it be?
Maybe,
where you got, like Gone with the Wind. And actually, when I think about it, Red
Badge of Courage.
Yeah. When I think about War and Peace and how I felt about it when I read it, I did feel similarly to Gone with the Wind. I mean, okay, they're not in the same category.
No, of course.
But in the sense of, when you read War and Peace, you feel like you drop into another world and you can't imagine at the end of it sort of continuing life because what's going to happen to these characters?
Yes.
Did you feel that
What's
way?
going to happen to these characters? And you have to find out.
So how can it
out.
Be over? How that now that it's over, can it really be over? Because you do feel as if you have just been living your life with them, which is a remarkable accomplishment.
The book opens on the brink of war, and we're at a dinner party, first pages, and a bunch of Russian aristocrats are sitting around in a salon, and they're discussing Napoleon and his unbeatable army. It's a very swanky party. The discussion is very regal, and I want to say, first-time readers, here's a claim. The opening 20 pages of the book are the worst 20 pages of the book, in my estimation. And one of the reasons why is that the Russian aristocrats are speaking a lot of French. And Tolstoy is kind of setting us up here because if you are a Russian aristocrat, you're taking a lot of pride in the fact that you were educated on the continent and you speak with a flawless French accent, and this is a sign that you were educated, that you were wealthy enough for your parents to send you to the continent, get educated in the French language, and to return. And Tolstoy hates these people. I mean,
Well,
really hates them. Go ahead.
this is naming such a burr in Russian culture that's been a burr probably since Peter the Great, who tries to bring Russia into Europe. How European are we? And how Russian are we, right? And so Tolstoy's pointing that out right at the beginning.
From the first page, he is Russian.
He's Russian, but this fascination with Europe, give it up. I mean, that's what he wants to say, right? The Russian soul is more. But this has been a real thing for the Russians. How European are we? It still is at play today, is it not? How European are we?
You could consider the 1,000+ pages of War and Peace to be an extended argument about should we be more European or should we be Russian? And he has a definitive answer. No doubt he has a definitive answer. Okay,
yes.
So we're at this party, Emily. Swanky. People are speaking French. They've got their pinky up when they drink their champagne. And in walks this social bumbler, this huge bear of a man. His name is Pierre Bezukhov. And he is the hero of the book. I know. There are over 600 characters. Like there's tons and tons and tons of characters. But if there's one person that we follow more than anybody else, it is Pierre. And Pierre does not make a grand entrance at all, does he?
No, I mean, that's part of it, isn't it? With him, he is, would you go so far as to consider him an anti-hero? He is somewhat of an anti-hero.
At the beginning, I think he is. At the beginning.
Yeah, and it is the progression of him, but he isn't presented as, I mean, in those other epics that we have, the hero is the hero, right? They go through development, but the hero is the hero. But yeah, Pierre, and that's why you love him. Because
I know.
He comes on and he's just so real, isn't he?
He is.
He's so real. We've all been Pierre.
But it's paired with this terrible social awkwardness.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we find out soon after he's got kind of a dark history, at least to Russian aristocrats. And the dark history is he is the illegitimate son of a very wealthy count. And this very wealthy count apparently got around. So Pierre is one of dozens of illegitimate sons, dozens of them. So, but Pierre, even if he didn't have this kind of checkered background, he still is bumbling. He says awkward things at the party, right? He wants to be very simple, even though he's got a really elite European education. But the thing I think that bonds us with him more than anything else is that he is full of these deep, deep existential questions about fate, about free will, about goodness and how to be good, about the interconnectedness of human society. And we're not supposed to talk about those things at parties.
Yeah,
that's
right.
We're not supposed to do that.
That's the thing that he does is that he's too earnest and deep feeling, right? And he too, at the beginning, really admires Napoleon, isn't it? It's interesting from our previous episode that he too feels so much promise in Napoleon, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Everything changes for Pierre, though, in an instant. An unexpected instant. So he's this social bumbler. He's got a really great friend, Andrei, who we'll meet in a second. But everything pivots and everything changes for him when his father dies. And lo and behold, who does he leave the mass of his fortune to? He leaves it to Pierre. And it is a mound of gold. I mean, just a huge, huge fortune. And all of a sudden, and I think Tolstoy is making a comment here, Pierre goes from a little bit of a social pariah to the most eligible bachelor in Russia. And he used to, when he walked in the door for a party, everybody would be like, oh gosh, don't let him come over here. Now he walks into a party and everybody's like, Pierre, how are you? Hey, it's great. Come over here. Let me pour you a drink. Pierre, how are you? Good to see you.
It's the start of Pride and Prejudice, where it says a man in possession of a fortune of 100,000, right?
That's right.
It's just that same thing. Yes, he's well liked within the neighborhood suddenly, and it's so sad too because then it's to Pierre's detriment, isn't it?
It is
because
it
then
is to his detriment.
He is entrapped in a loveless marriage with an awful woman.
She's awful. She's so terrible. So he goes and he's basically cajoled into marrying an absolute beauty. Absolute beauty. But the rumors are that she has some sort of incestuous relationship with her brother.
Oh, poor Pierre. And Pierre's so deep and loving. And
yes,
there's a purity to him. Even if he has not always lived up to his own moral code, there is a purity about Pierre that comes through the whole novel.
Helene is the name of his wife. The marriage does not go very well. But let's pause on Pierre. And I'm not going to do it. We can't go into all of the curves and swerves that is War and Peace. So I want to introduce two other main characters, and then we'll eventually get to the fourth main character, who I'm going to call the kind of secret hero of War and Peace. Okay. The next two characters that we need to know are, first, Natasha Rostova. Natasha is absolutely, for me, one of the best drawn characters in all of literature. We meet her at age 13, very early in the novel, and she bursts into the room. She has so much life, so much exuberance. She jumps off the page. She's just uncontainably alive.
She does.
In my heart of hearts, there's a little bit of me that my daughter, maybe it's just a state that she's in, she has got so much life. Yesterday, Emily, my daughter is 19 months old. I was at our condo. Galen brings Arden inside. She opens the door and Arden's on foot and she sees that I'm standing there and she just like screams, "What?" and runs all the way across the room with like hair flailing behind her, hands up in the air, and runs and like grabs hold of my leg because she's so excited to see me.
Terrible. That's just a terrible feeling.
It was
that
the
my
best
daughter
thing in the world.
loves me. I know.
It was so great. But it's like the exuberance of just common life. You see it in Natasha constantly. She's such a beautiful person, and she ends up being friends with Pierre. He's older than her. They end up being friends. He's kind of a counselor to her in some ways. But eventually, she falls in love with somebody else. Here's the somebody else. Andrei Bolkonsky. So the Rostova family, Natasha Rostova, the Bolkonsky family, these are two of the big families that you will need to be diagramming in the front cover of War and Peace in order to keep track of all these characters. Andrei Bolkonsky is almost the diametric opposite of Pierre. He's handsome. He's socially smooth. He's intellectual. He's really appealing. He walks in the room and he commands respect.
People turn and look at him. When he walks in the room, people turn because he has a presence about him, right?
He has a presence about him. That's right.
Through the book, you know people like this.
You do. And you kind of want to be a guy like Andrei. It's so interesting. If there's a second main character in the book, it's probably Andrei.
But we're not with him a lot. We're not with him as much.
We're not with him a lot, but he exerts a tremendous amount of influence over the book. He's disillusioned with his wife because his wife is just preoccupied with all of these trivialities. Like, what wallpaper should we hang in the salon? And do we think this doily is appropriate for our tea time? And Andrei is a man like Pierre with great and earnest depth and questions and thoughts. And they pop up in his discussions. Eventually, Andrei joins the war effort, largely because he wants to get away from his wife. It's a real sad part of the book that he just doesn't want to be with her, and she kind of knows it, and it's terrible.
It is sad. He's also drawn to the heroism, right? I mean, the magnetism of war. He feels like what's the point of his life? He's sitting there, right? And this is like it's also to give his life meaning. I mean,
that's right.
Try to find it some other way. But the thing that we've talked about with war this whole season is that sense of being drawn up into something greater than yourself. And he wants that.
Emily, there's a theory that Andrei and Pierre, these two lead male characters, are kind of the two sides of Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah, can see that.
Bumbling, internally sensitive, lacking confidence, racked with eternal questions, part of Tolstoy. And then the other part is the handsome, extremely wealthy, confident man that Leo Tolstoy had. And Leo Tolstoy probably had like thousands of people inside him because the way that he draws characters is so incredible.
He's so insightful.
So insightful. So, as I mentioned, War and Peace is one of those books like the Iliad. You'll need to diagram the names because there's so many of them. And making things even more complicated. I sound like I'm like chasing people away from this book when I really want people to try it. Another complicating factor is every main character usually has about two or three names.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know, I have a great tip on this. Can I give you a tip?
Oh, yeah.
This comes from my husband, who finally read Crime and Punishment. And he's like, I just make up names. So Razumikin is Razmataz. You just make up a name and keep it with the same person. And then you don't like sit and fixate on the name. You just, and you have to know their derivatives, but just make up your own names. I thought that was a great idea. Rather than
is a good
have
idea.
it be something that keeps you from reading the book. Because it's overwhelming. Yes.
Right. If you're sounding out Bezukhov every time you come across that name, you're going to get bogged down.
Call him Bazooka. Just call him a bazooka.
Bazooka. Pierre Bazooka. Emily, I want to tell you, here's a little sidebar. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union and the United States are in this massive Cold War. In the Soviet Union, they really want to prove that the communist system is not just a competitor to capitalism, American Western-style capitalism, but it's superior to Western-style capitalism. And so one of the ways that they're going to prove it, they decide to film War and Peace.
It's so funny, isn't it?
It is. They're like, we're gonna out Hollywood. We're going to do it communist style. It's going to be better.
Because War and Peace is the diametrically opposed novel to communist Russia. So it's so funny. It's like all about aristocracy and, it's so funny. Well, how did they do it?
So they commissioned a director, Sergei Bondarchuk, to co-write and direct the movie. They give it the largest movie budget ever granted in Russian history.
Which I'm sure was not very much.
It was, no. It was huge. They give it a huge budget.
Okay.
Because like, if you're fighting the U.S., like, that's a reason to like really
starve your people,
the market with funds.
Starve your people so you can have a really great movie.
Right. So I know what you're thinking, Emily. It's communist Russia. Like, this movie is going to be a massive flop, right?
Well, I don't know. No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay. Well, you'd be right.
So tell me. Oh, okay.
Emily, it is incredible. It's absolutely...
I've never watched it.
There's a Criterion collection, and after I finished War and Peace, the last time that I read it, this is a few years ago, I was like, I'm going to watch this version of War and Peace. Of course, it's all in Russian, English subtitles. In 1966, it won an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film.
Oh, wow.
Now, I just want to say one more thing about this. The scale of War and Peace, the book, is incredibly wide. The scale of the movie almost matches it. The battle scenes, I am not kidding you.
How many people died making that movie? That's what I want to know.
That's a great question. Many, probably.
Yeah.
So there was kind of, during these battle scenes, there's one shot, camera is pressed in on this battle, and then probably through a helicopter, the camera starts floating above the hills. And remember the painting that we talked about in our last episode?
Yeah.
I really do think that
they used that
painting, the Battle of Borodino, 1812, was meant as a kind of imprint for the scene that they show in this film. So if you are near your computer, type in Battle of Borodino, 1812, and you'll see this huge expanse of land teeming with soldiers everywhere. In this movie, Emily, they do, I'm pretty sure, and a shot of that painting.
That's
as
amazing.
The camera scales out on a helicopter, and the number of people involved, it's not CGI. There is no CGI. It's 1967 or whatever it is. And so the rumors started spreading that they had 100,000 extras for the filming of War and Peace. Yeah. So they asked the director about this, and the director said, no. Don't exaggerate. It was only 10,000 extras. And you're like, wait, that's a huge number.
That's a huge number. That's so funny. One of the benefits of having a totalitarian state is you can order people to be in your great movie, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, they
probably just had a little of their farming village, and they said, "Hey, congratulations, you're all conscripted to be in War and Peace." Congratulations.
I have to say, there's another great version. Have you seen the recent BBC adaptation? Not epic on that scale, but still beautifully done. Oh, you should go watch it because
I bet I would love it.
The best Pierre I've ever seen.
Really?
I loved this Pierre so much. I loved this Pierre so much. So
Emily, Tolstoy fought in the Crimean War, which predated the Napoleonic invasion. So he was a soldier, but he also did an incredible amount of research to make War and Peace accurate with regards to its historical content. And what's really interesting is that it's kind of hard to place what kind of book War and Peace is.
Right.
Like what genre it belongs in.
It's a genre-busting book.
It is. It's a genre-busting novel. And one of the things that's most strange about it, I'm going to list two of the things. First, Napoleon appears as a character in the book.
Yes.
Now, this is done all the time by like Shakespeare. But what's different about this is that the main characters, Pierre, Andrei, Natasha, they're all fictionalized.
Right.
And then they will have conversations with this real historical figure, Napoleon, and their conversations are from the imagination of Leo Tolstoy.
Yes.
So, and here's the second thing that makes genre-ing War and Peace really difficult. Tolstoy breaks into this mode where he leaves his story, and for several pages, he just starts writing about philosophy of history. Right?
Right. I'm thinking of, that's so interesting, thinking about the fact of, dropping Napoleon in, because I think Solzhenitsyn does the same thing when he starts writing in the 20th century. That was just hitting me, where he has Stalin is in First Circle,
I did not know that.
Stalin as a character, yeah. And so that is a curious, I wonder if he sort of starts that out for the Russians in a way. But I'm also thinking about Les Miserables, because, Hugo does that same thing that Tolstoy does. I actually think about those two books together, where he, hey, we didn't do Les Miserables on the Napoleonic Wars.
I know, we didn't do Les Miserables. I know.
But he has that same thing where he chronicles the Battle of Waterloo, just like Tolstoy is going to chronicle the Battle of Borodino, the Battle of Moscow, the Battle of Austerlitz, where they, you're like, okay, I am in now 100 pages of this battle that he's been describing. Okay, where are we going? That's how I felt the first few times I read it.
Nice.
The second time I read it, I felt it was way more compelling to me to read about the war. But when you're reading it the first time through, you're like, I just want Natasha. Where is Natasha?
Yes, right. Completely. So one more comment about these little historical philosophy of history interludes, and then I'm going to talk about the genre that is Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. It just is written like an essay, these historical interludes, and Tolstoy just starts talking to the reader as if we are reading an essay about the nature of writing history and what moves history, and is Napoleon like the kind of figure that shapes history? Should we believe in like the great man theory of history, or should we believe in like the movements and ideas kind of history? So he just will cut to that, and then he'll cut back to his main tale. And you're like, Leo, what are you doing?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It was such a big deal back in the day. It caused so much confusion that he wrote an article in one of the major papers, maybe like the St. Petersburg Times or whatever it was, in which he addresses, I think the title of the essay is something like, "What genre is War and Peace?" And he kind of like names all the questions that people have. And you know what his answer is, Emily?
What?
It's
so Tolstoy.
Great. It's just like,
it's so Tolstoy.
It's so Tolstoy. It's so full of like hubris, but also like common sense.
Yeah.
He says, the genre of War and Peace is a genre invented by the author to suit his goals.
Yeah, rules don't apply to me because I am the great artist, and I will.
Do you know who I am? I'm Leo Tolstoy.
I will depart from the form because the form works for me, not me for the form. Right? This is
That's
great.
Right.
He's the romantic ideal in that sense as well, just like Beethoven. Like, I leave the form behind when it doesn't suit what I want.
So be it, Leo. I'm going to talk a little bit later about his biography because he is really a titan of literature, is Leo Tolstoy.
Yes.
But first, I want to introduce our fourth, I'm calling him the secret hero of War and Peace. We heard from him, Emily, in your opening quote, General Kutuzov. General Kutuzov is the last guy that you would expect to be a hero. He's old, he's lost an eye, he's retired, and in a lot of ways, he is everything that Napoleon is not. Napoleon is scientific, rationalistic, all put together. And Kutuzov is just the opposite. He's kind of a little bit bumbling. The big thing that he is that Kutuzov does not believe in the science of warfare. This is something that was incredibly popular in the time, that it was believed that war could be fought according to rational principles. It's like height of the Enlightenment, right?
This is the height of the Enlightenment.
Everything is subject to science.
Yeah, and everything is explainable through laws that we just need to discover. So if we discover the laws of war, we can be unbeatable, right?
Right.
We can conquer all. Yeah, and it is like the perfect encapsulation of the Enlightenment spirit, that idea. We can control war, and we will do it.
His Russian generals, the generals that are serving for him during the Napoleonic War, gather before this huge battle. And it's very clear they believe in the science of war. And according to the science of war, they've done all the calculations, all the geometry adds up, and they look at the battle that's going to happen tomorrow, and they're like, we're going to win.
Yeah.
According to the science of war, we're going to win. So here's an excerpt from the quote. What foresight for every eventuality, for every condition, down to the smallest detail, an officer exclaimed. Then, after the discussion stopped, Kutuzov opened his eye as a miller wakes up when the soporific drone of the mill wheel is interrupted, and listens with an expression that seemed to say, "Oh, you're still talking about that same nonsense."
And he just lets them spin their wild fancies, and he just doesn't pay it the time of day.
Doesn't pay any attention.
Such a great character.
Later on in the discussion, Kutuzov speaks, and here's on the brink of like maybe what will be the biggest land battle in the history of the war, in the history of the world. Gentlemen, the disposition for tomorrow, or rather for today, for it is past midnight, cannot be altered. The disposition cannot be altered now. And before a battle, there is nothing more important, he paused, than a good night's sleep.
It's so great. We both have read this essay, which was in First Things, and we'll make sure that we link to it, called Tolstoy's Wisdom and Folly. And the guy makes such a good point. He just says, Kutuzov is the embodiment of the sense that there are things that cannot be reduced to scientific certainty. And war, there are many things, but war is one of the top things. And the Battle of Borodino just points that out, like the painting,
yes,
the scale, the insanity of these masses of men that are trying to be controlled in an orderly way. And that is what Kutuzov says. Like, there's just no way to reduce this. It all hinges on these different moments. And we've seen that in all of our readings, right? Henry V's call to his troops before they join the Battle of... why is the battle escaping my mind right at this moment?
It's escaping mine also. Before the big battle.
Before the Battle of Agincourt. But you see the power of Henry to inspire his troops to do something that they didn't think they could do. And Kutuzov notices the same thing. He says, you just have no idea what the battle may hinge on. You have no idea.
Emily, this has become a life principle for me. I'm not kidding at all.
Yes, I agree. It's a life principle for me too.
In my work, I have to present artistic ideas to clients. So our team will develop a graphic image that is like that's something that we will need to get approved by our client. And my team oftentimes will lay and worry. I'm not trying to throw anybody from my team under the bus. They are appropriately worried and they are very high functioning, and they worry, how will the client receive this piece of artwork? And more for me, because I've been in the room with clients who make these decisions, and I hear the reason that they say yes or no or maybe or change this or change that. I just think, you know what? It could all depend on the president of a university having a bad burrito before the meeting.
Completely.
Right?
Completely. And that's
your work is similar. You make proposals
exactly. And you just
to clients, and have you seen this?
Oh, 100%. You just have no idea. I mean, you also notice it in group dynamics where you can see, like, you can feel a conversation going one way, and then all of a sudden something changes and the conversation turns and goes the opposite direction than you expected, right?
Yeah.
Off of something that there are too many contingencies to predict
so many variables,
all the outcomes. And that is one of the things I appreciate so much from Kutuzov and Tolstoy's depiction of him, is this sense of our smallness in the face of vast unknown things that we have no control over, which is a little bit a message through the entirety of War and Peace, isn't it? All of these things that we do with sort of hubristic certainty, even Pierre's becoming a Mason, doesn't have the outcome that he expects.
Right.
You know?
Right. I think that is a trait of Tolstoy's writing, that the desired outcome rarely matches the form of the initial desire. It's always refracted in some ways.
Yes.
And sometimes it's refracted for the better and sometimes for the worse, but you never really get exactly what you want.
Yes.
Always shifted by the time that you achieve it. So our hero, secret hero, Kutuzov, makes a really controversial decision relatively late in the book. His decision is to abandon Moscow to Napoleon because he thinks that preserving the Russian army is more important than defending the city. I mean,
and he was right.
He was right. He was exactly right. It was tremendously unpopular, leaving the mother city of Moscow to this hostile, marauding invader, Napoleon. Are you serious? But he thought, if we can preserve the army, then there's another way that we can defeat Napoleon. And that other way is through the Russian winter.
Exactly.
The Russian winter.
Exactly. Come closer, Napoleon. Come to us.
Please step deeper into our living room.
Well, that principle of Kutuzov, I do try to remember it, and I don't remember it enough. But just because somebody wants to fight you doesn't mean you have to fight them, which is his entire point. This essay that we enjoyed so much says that Kutuzov is the master of non-action, right? And so much of modernity is sort of swept up with like the great man, or we can change things, high school graduations. How are you going to change the world?
Right.
And like Kutuzov is not living in that realm. He's saying we cannot do that. And so just because Napoleon wants to fight me does not mean I have to fight him. And he was so brilliant and so right.
Emily, let me tell you a little bit more about Leo Tolstoy. He is one of the literary titans of Western civilization. Absolutely one of the titans. The Christian tradition has a pretty strained relationship with Tolstoy. So on the one hand, he's the grandfather of the nonviolent resistance movement.
Yeah,
so he is. Tolstoy, Gandhi, MLK. And you can see it in the writings. Tolstoy, and it's his conviction about what the gospel really was, believes in non-resistance in the face of mass injustice as a form of protest, because combating violence leads to violence.
But he doesn't adopt this till late in his life. We should point that out, because when he writes War and Peace, he is not there.
And he's wrestling with like how grotesque war is. He wrestles with it his entire life. And then he develops, through his kind of idiosyncratic reading of the Gospels, the nonviolent resistance movement that kind of climaxes in MLK's work. On the other hand, he was a very outspoken critic of the Russian Orthodox Church. He considered the Russian Orthodox Church to be heretical. And they agreed, likewise, he was heretical.
They had no... Same.
They excommunicated him in 1901. Here's a little historical comp for you, Emily. Tolstoy could read the Bible in Hebrew and Greek, and he did this little thing that he would read the New Testament and he would say, "That's so wild about that chapter. I think that's out. I think I'm going to pluck that one out."
Our friend Thomas Jefferson, he and old Thomas
that's the exact Yeah. Jefferson read through the New Testament and he would just snip out the miracles.
Take out this.
Emily, have you ever read a Jefferson New Testament?
I've seen excerpts of it, but I haven't. I didn't hurt myself that way. I decided to avoid being hurt that way.
I'm just going to tell you what the last sentence is. It's really chilling.
Oh, no.
And they put him in the tomb and rolled forward the stone.
No.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes. Because everything that happens after that is like vibrantly miraculous. There's no way around it. And Jefferson is like, no, that's out. That's all out.
Yeah, because, that makes sense with his non-appreciation of the miracles, right? Oh, my gosh. Thank you for telling me that.
I ruined your day with that.
Yeah, well, it's just more confirmatory of what I think of Thomas Jefferson.
Just a couple other things about Tolstoy before I'm going to roll out my hot take.
Okay.
He was not lacking ego.
He sure was not.
It was once said that Tolstoy seemed to regard God as a rival, as if they were two bears in the same cave.
Could I have helped you with the writing of Holy Scripture? I could have made it more poetic.
Right.
Probably would have said that.
One other testament to the size of his ego, he famously, Tolstoy, hated Shakespeare.
Wow.
He deplored Shakespeare as immoral. But for me, it's not hard to make the case that the reason he hated Shakespeare is because Shakespeare was his rival. And there could only be one top dog.
Isn't that funny that he thought of them as immoral? Because that's one of the funny things about Tolstoy is he is a little bit... Don't you think he's a little bit of a prude?
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's very moralistic, especially late in life. He's very moralistic. Yeah,
so that kind of fits.
It's true.
That's funny.
Okay, Emily, I'm going to roll with my hot take, and then we can start to close up shop. I don't know if this is much of a hot take, but I'm going to make it. I'm going to make a bold claim.
Great.
Mount Rushmore of Western literature, Homer, Dante,
oh my gosh.
Shakespeare, Tolstoy.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Holy cow. That's hot, Tim.
Mount Rushmore.
Okay, but the thing is, would Tolstoy even agree to be in it because it is the Mount Rushmore of Western literature? Would he even agree that he would have his face there?
If it meant him getting accolades that included him being on Mount Rushmore, yes, he would. Yes, he would.
Are you sure?
Oh,
That's
man,
such a
I
good
stand
question.
by this. Emily, he's absolutely one of the greats.
He is
War
one
and
of the greats.
Peace, Anna Karenina, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. These are zenith marks in novel writing. Absolutely zenith marks.
Can I just tell you a small funny story at the end?
Yeah.
When I was reading some Tolstoy essays just to be ready for War and Peace again, I came across an essay written by David Bentley Hart, a great theologian and philosopher.
Yeah.
And he related the reoccurring situation that he has when he goes to conferences and says what you just said, that Tolstoy is the better novelist than Dostoevsky. And he says every single time he is interrupted by the loud gasp of a woman in her 40s sitting in the front row with brown hair saying, "No, Dostoevsky."
No kidding.
And I was like, well,
no kidding.
If the shoe fit.
Emily, that question, Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, has been like an ongoing dilemma for me. And I hate to say it because I love Dostoevsky, but the better novelist is Tolstoy. Whose like view of the world do I agree with more? I'm probably with Dostoevsky. But as far as just like the ability to craft a scene, a character, a book, it's Tolstoy. But we're talking about like two of the absolute titans. Okay, I'm going to close it with one little snippet. Like Tolstoy was famous for long books, right? But when War and Peace comes out, he sends a telegram to his publisher. The telegram is not one sentence. It is not one word. It is one character. This is after War and Peace was published. He wants to know from his publisher what the reception is among the populace, the reading populace of his book. Do you know what the one character was?
I do not. Well, he wants to know, so it's a question mark.
It's a question mark, right. His publisher responded in kind. Not with one sentence, not with one word, but with one character. Do you know what the character was?
I don't.
An exclamation point.
He used up all his words writing the novel, so he didn't have any more words.
He had no words left. He had no words left. Okay, last thing. I challenge you, our readers, if you have not read War and Peace, it is honestly, it is not a highbrow book. It has a very common touch. What's intimidating about it should not be the prose or anything like that. It's the length. So here's my challenge to you. On January 4, if you read one chapter a day for the rest of the year, you will finish on December 31st. There are 361 chapters in War and Peace. The shortest is 4 pages. The longest is only 11 pages. It's not that long. One chapter a night, and at the end of a year, you can say, I just got done reading Tolstoy's War and Peace. You know, next time you're at a party and you're not like bumbling like Pierre, I just read War and Peace. And
you just slip that out of your pocket. Yeah, and I just read War and Peace, and find it to be pretty interesting.
Read the Constance Garnett translation. There are other more contemporary translations. Constance Garnett is still my favorite.
Pierre and Volkonsky is the better one.
Oh, do you really? Okay. I think you're safe with either one. You're safe with either one. Emily, we're at the end of War and Peace.
Holy cow, we made it through War and Peace. Congratulations, Tim.
Congratulations. I can't believe it. Hey, I want to thank Clark Stefanik, our wonderful producer. Clark is in the background of these recordings, but he is in the foreground of our hearts. If you like this podcast, you might like some of the other podcasts on the True North platform. True North is dedicated to the renewal of classical education in the United States and abroad. And thanks, as always, to Tom Hagerman. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Tom Hagerman. You might like listening to his band, Vodka. Emily, see you next time on Hot Takes on the Classics.
See you, Tim.